Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Popcorn Isn't Real with me, your host, Torvald, and
me, your other host, Leif Eric. So today we're going to be talking about Flight of the Navigator.
The Flight of the Navigator came out in 1986. It was directed by Randall Kleiser. He directed Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, Blue Lagoon, and Grease.
What?
Yeah.
Blue Lagoon?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
You know, the Blue Lagoon parody in Top Secret, right?
Oh, dude. Yeah. Oh, that was a really good parody. And also completely out of place, out of left field. Like, what the heck? Speaking of writhing body parts, Randall Kleiser's first directing job was a little title called Orgy Beach Party in 1964. Which...
Okay. So I'm starting to get a vision for the trajectory of his career.
Right.
He started in porn.
He did.
And then he elevated to Hollywood porn, which is Blue Lagoon.
Okay.
Basically porn, but they released it in theaters.
To musicals,
and then now that he was a Hollywood director,
movies.
Right, he could get other types of jobs. And he was like, I guess I'll do a family film.
Now, this is very interesting. Max the Robot. I think maybe we knew this, but Max the Robot was voiced by Pee Wee Herman, by Paul Rubens.
Well, he does a good job at doing the serious voice.
He did. And that's the thing is Paul Rubens is actually a good and prolific voice actor. Like, he's done lots of voice acting. And just a little sci-fi connection, he was also the voice for RX-24, which is the robot tour guide on Disney's Star Tours. So that's cool. He's got his own place in the Star Wars universe, and he voices robots that fly ships. That's what he does.
Yep. All right. So Flight of the Navigator. It's about this spoiled rich kid in...
Is he a spoiled rich kid, though? Like, he didn't seem like obscenely rich or anything. He's just a...
They have their own boat.
It's like a speedboat, dude. I mean, come on. They're not rich. They're just middle class.
I don't know. They live in a really nice house that is literally right next to the ocean.
This is the 80s, dude.
1978 is when it starts. So yeah, maybe they weren't so rich back then. But now it's just like, oh yeah, sure. You're just living right on the beach, huh?
Well, and then when he's older, they're living in kind of like a slummy, cruddy house.
Right, because they spent all their money looking for him.
No, they did. What could they have spent their money on? Like, did they buy a helicopter? What do you think they did?
I don't. It doesn't matter because it's all a dream anyway.
All right. Fair enough.
Spoiled rich kid. He goes out to look for his brother. He falls down a hill. He hits his head. He wakes up in 1986.
Okay,
He's been missing.
Ask, so this kid, he lives next to the ocean. He also lives next to like a freaking jungle with a giant ravine. It's like a jungle with like vines. Like,
they have some overgrown foresty areas.
Okay,
I don't know.
All right. You get on with your plot.
So he's going to find his brother. He falls down a hill. He wakes up, and he's in the future. He's just been missing this whole time. And then,
which I gotta say, that's a cool plot point, right? Like,
no, that is cool. Like, I
everything
like that.
About
like,
this movie was fun until a certain part of the movie.
Like, if they just start like that, it's like this weird unexplained mystery, right? Like, some kid disappears for like 8 years, comes back, he's the same age.
I gotta say though, probably not a good choice starting off the movie with 3 solid minutes of dogs catching frisbees.
Yeah. And also, so in this movie, NASA is the FBI, basically.
Dude, yeah.
Right? Like,
we'll get into that.
But anyway, so NASA has a spaceship that they found, and it turns out this little boy is somehow connected to it, and then he ends up getting into it, and then they fly around, and it steals his brain for a while. It brings him back home. It
steals his brain forever.
Right. Well, that's true. My theory is that none of that happens. Like with many of the theories we do, Return to Oz, Phantasm, this is another, it was all in his head theory. The popcorn isn't real.
So you're saying everything after he fell in the ravine, boom, it's all in his head.
Yeah, basically.
Did he die?
No, he did not die.
He brings back an alien.
Okay, see, we'll get to that. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
We'll talk about the alien.
Great.
Okay, so there are 2 interesting things here. It was all a dream in his head because he has head trauma. He fell down a hill, head trauma. He had this strange dream, and then he wakes up right back where he left off in that same ravine. He comes back to his family, right? So the movie supports my theory. One thing I will say, though, is that no matter what, this has to be a prophetic dream because he prophesized 1986 really
Yep,
well.
it's exactly 1986, except also with like some robots and, like you said, NASA's the FBI.
So maybe that's a theory for the whole it wasn't a dream side of this
It's
argument.
true. He did predict Twisted Sister the band.
Yes, he did. I'm just going to go through some points. When he is at NASA's facility, so NASA takes him to the facility to study him. NASA also has this UFO at his facility in the future.
When NASA found that UFO, a NASA security car drives up. What the heck?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know NASA necessarily had a security division, but I mean, I understand if they do, but shouldn't they be securing NASA's networks and stuff, not driving around investigating spaceships? What's going on?
Perhaps because NASA was like, I don't know, a newer thing. And the people writing it, like writing these movies, like, you know, they remembered like the moon landing and all that stuff. NASA seemed like a really big deal. And so they just equated it to robots and FBI.
Dude, I gotta say, that gigantic, clunky, stupid looking robot was nowhere near as slick and cool looking as I remembered it. Like, that is a dumb looking robot.
It delivers mail. Like, that's all it does. And yet it's huge.
Yeah.
There's no reason to
huge.
have that robot.
And it has, like, it can't do anything.
No,
right?
it needs Sarah Jessica Parker.
She has to be with it to pull things out of it. It's a useless robot.
It creates
It's
a job.
cart.
It doesn't do anything.
She could just pull a cart. Oh my gosh.
But they knew who their demographic was, right?
Yeah.
They knew it was little boys
Dude,
who like
I
robots.
loved that robot when I was little.
When he is in that facility with the robot, at one point, I think when he wakes up, he says, he's hurt. He's calling me.
Yeah.
Now, I think this is interesting because the boy is the one who was hurt. And I
Yes.
believe the ship is representative of the boy's brain.
Right.
Especially if
I
you
think
look at the
that's
ship,
actually really
it
good.
looks
I like
like
that.
a brain. And
Kinda,
also,
yeah.
the ship needs his brain, right? Like,
You're
to
right.
work. The ship is his empty head that has been hurt, right? Because he got head trauma.
No,
and
like,
it
you're
can't
actually
work
right. Like,
without
the ship-
him. He is the consciousness that it needs.
Well, and like, first of all, the ship in its normal form, it looks exactly like a brain. You're right. And I didn't even notice that until you said it. But also,
Yeah.
as the movie goes along, the ship deforms, which his brain may have done when it got hit. Right?
Sure may have.
Dude, that's pretty interesting. I did not notice that. That's good.
Another interesting part of this movie is that his family is really happy to see him, but of course they have aged. And his younger brother is now his older brother,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of fun.
That is fun. I thought that was a really cool dynamic, a really cool thing to put into the movie. Even as a kid, I was like, well, that's weird. Like, what if I woke up and I was suddenly your older brother?
But one thing his brother does say to him is he says, "You're probably the only sane person in this place." Now, this is actually what most alien abductees tend to think.
Yeah.
That they're the only sane person and it's all a conspiracy against
So
them.
you're
But
saying his
really,
brain is
it's all
telling
in
itself
their
that?
head. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
At one point, he wakes up and his brother is near him and his brother says, "It's just a bad dream," which I think, you know, is
Dude,
referring to the movie itself.
That's good. You're saying that his brother is both like his grounding to reality, trying to tell him it's a dream, but also his grounding to unreality, telling him you're the only sane person here.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Maybe he's just part of his brain that's
trying to keep
convince him that he needs
lucid?
to become sane, right? Yeah.
Okay,
Stay
okay.
lucid. So interestingly enough, at one point they bring in, I think it's some weird printouts of some weird code, and they bring it to the NASA director and he's like, "Where did this come from?" And the person says, "From the mind of a 12-year-old boy." The entire movie is in the mind of a 12-year-old boy.
That scene was really weird because why all of a sudden is this wireframe of a spaceship from David's head suddenly being printed out at NASA and presented to Dr. Faraday, which, by the way, really cool name. Dr. Faraday has no idea where it came from and wasn't expecting it. When they printed that out from his head, they're doing some tests on him, and I think this goes along with your theory pretty well. They've got a bunch of stuff strapped to his head, and they're analyzing his brain waves. Mm-hmm. And I think this is kind of weird, because why are they even doing that? Like, all they know is that this kid disappeared for 8 years and came back. Why are they specifically interested in his brain waves?
What they say about his brainwaves when he's like communicating with this spaceship, and they say he's transmitting in alpha waves with complex frequency patterns in them. And so alpha waves,
Dude, they're actual brainwaves, which I was like, good job, movie. And they say they're coming in at 12.8 cycles per second, which means 12.8 hertz. And that actually does correspond okay to brainwaves, as far as I could tell online.
and one thing about alpha waves is they are brain waves that happen. I mean, they happen at different times, and it can be while you're sleeping during REM cycles. It can also be during when your eyes are closed, but you're just not really thinking about much at that moment.
Okay.
Which, of course, maybe that's what an unconscious person would be doing.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Also, they think that alpha brain waves are related to mistake prediction. And so
You're thinking like he's thinking about the mistake of falling down
right,
the cliff?
right. He made a mistake of falling down a cliff, and I think maybe he's transmitting an
How
alpha
could
brain
this kid
waves.
possibly know that? Like, how could he know about alpha brainwaves to insert it into his little delusion?
Right. I think part of this is in-universe explanation. I also think part of it is the writers giving us little hints that
fair.
it was all in his head.
So you're saying this is the writers telling us.
Yeah, this is more of a
this
meta
kid is
clue.
having an episode, right?
Than an in-universe clue. Yeah.
Cool. No, that's pretty good. One thing about that, what exactly is a complex frequency, and what do they mean he's transmitting? Like, what are they talking about?
Right. I don't think it really
why did
makes
they
much
put
sense.
these brainwave analysis things on his head if they weren't expecting anything? So in that same scene, there's a nurse guy. He's staring intently at David through a window. He glances, and I mean this is a literal like glance down to your right and then look away. Like it's like if you thought you saw a shadow and you look and then it's nothing and you look away, right? Like it's a tiny glance at a computer screen. Then he announces he's communicating directly with the computer in binary code. What do they mean by this? And how could he have known that from that little tiny glance at the computer? Like, I mean, do they mean that the EEG is reading his brainwaves and interpreting them in binary? Because that's kind of the point of the program, right? Or have his brainwaves somehow broken out of the analysis program and begun giving commands to the computer? Because that's pretty cool. Like that would imply that he did something like maybe a Stack Overflow or something to break out of this program. And that's interesting and kind of sort of realistic. I think it was 2 years ago, some people, some DNA sequencing researchers, they had built a device to sequence DNA. They created a artificial strand of DNA which could be injected into somebody, which when sequenced would perform a Stack Overflow glitch on this machine to break out of its analysis protocol and start executing commands, which I thought was super cool. Like they literally hacked this machine with DNA. And
yeah, that is cool.
They just did it to prove that, hey, we need to have security measures in everything, even DNA sequencers, because what if like some organized crime unit purposefully gets somebody caught to have their DNA sequenced to inject code into your DNA sequencers? Like that's pretty dang cool. And it could happen with brainwaves too. Like if his brainwaves transmitted certain information in a certain way to this computer that it wasn't expecting, they could possibly put some commands into the memory of this computer, which would then be executed. A simplification of how Stack Overflows work. But either way, even if that's what he did, how can this guy possibly recognize that immediately? Like, it should just look to him like the computer is doing random stuff. How does he know that David is communicating directly with the computer in binary code? Anyway, I just thought that was a really interesting thing for somebody to announce.
And one more line they do say, I think while they're looking at all the different star charts that they find in his head, they say, oh my God, this kid's head is full.
Yes.
Which I think is another reference to his brain and the fact that it's damaged.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole point of this movie is that his brain is damaged, right? Like even in universe.
Yes. Here's, I think, a really compelling evidence for it was all in his head. So he is at the NASA facility, and there is a two-way mirror that the guards can watch him through in his room.
Yeah.
And he goes up to it and he starts screaming at it and banging on it. And he says, I want out of here right now. You think I don't watch television? And then he says, wake up. Now, he says all of the above as he stares at himself in the mirror.
Yeah.
He's literally yelling at himself to wake up.
So you think that he didn't know there were guards behind that mirror? He was
No,
just yelling at himself.
I think this is another more meta clue. Like, obviously, maybe the explanation is that he thinks the guards behind the mirror are sleeping, and that's why he's saying wake up. But I don't think it makes a lot of sense for him to just shout wake up right after. You think I don't watch television?
No.
Right?
Like, that's weird.
It doesn't exactly follow. I think that line was inserted in there as another hint to tell us that, hey, this kid is unconscious because he fell down into a ravine. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. When he first arrived at NASA and they show him to his bedroom, it's full of like toys and G.I. Joes and stuff. And I was always very jealous of this scene as a kid. I was like, man, why can't someone show me to a room full of cool toys? Like, that would be like my dream come true. But I thought it was really funny. The only things that Dr. Faraday feels are cool enough to point out to David are the remote control wand and a cap that says NASA. That's all. There's like toys and electronics and all kinds of cool stuff. But he's like, look at this remote and a hat.
The guy writing the script probably didn't know all the things the prop department would fill the room with.
It's true. But I mean, I just thought it was funny that out of all the interesting things in that movie, he picks like the most banal things, like the least interesting things he could have picked. And also interesting, David loves that hat. Like, he takes it and wears it all the time. Like, it was interesting to him. Dude, by the way, when that hat gets eaten, could that not be representative of something kind of like taking a bite out of his head? Right.
Well, the spaceship literally says that could have been your head.
Yep.
And this kid like has barely survived and probably could have crushed his whole head, but you know, he's only got a little bit of brain damage.
There you go. That's what I thought when that happened.
Right. So David gets to Max, the spaceship.
So that robot takes David to the spaceship. I don't know. You'll have to tell me what you thought, but I know that I thought as a kid that Sarah Jessica Parker had sent Ralph to pick up David and take him out.
Yeah.
Because he just had a conversation with her about how he's trapped there. Also, wow, Sarah Jessica Parker. Like, he's like, hey, I'm trapped here. I'm supposed to go home, but they won't let me. And she compares this kid literally being held against his will to her dad moving to a new base when he got new orders. She's like, you think you got it bad? Right. Every time my dad moved, I'd have to make new friends. Like, wow. Right. Sarah Jessica Parker, geez.
To her credit, though, she does help him escape.
Yeah, but did she, though? Because watching it now, it seemed very clear to me that the ship sent Ralph to pick up David. He calls to David and says, get in the Ralph unit when it entered the room.
Well, Sarah Jessica Parker for the rest of the movie acts like she helped him.
Yes, that's the thing. She acts very conspicuous. And I think in our version, like we had a version that was like taped off the TV. I think we couldn't hear the computer talking to David during that scene because I don't remember hearing anything during that scene. I just remember the robot coming in, he looks at it, and then gets into it. That Ralph unit then takes him to the building housing the alien spaceship. And they just let it in. What possible business could that robot have in that room?
Dude, like, it's delivering a little boy.
Why is it authorized to go in there? There's no possible reason that robot could need to go in there.
Well, they don't have cell phones, right? They can't text each other. Like, they need a way to send messages to even people in that building, you know?
Yeah, but that robot is a bad way to send messages. It needs someone to come with it to take the messages out of it.
Also, like, if all it does is deliver like letters, it doesn't need to have a compartment large enough to fit David.
I mean, I guess it delivers food, and I think that's why it has that big compartment, so it can have like multiple trays of food in it. But I don't know.
Okay,
anyway, wow. I just don't understand why that ship would need to get into the UFO room.
So we've already talked about how the ship is shaped like a brain.
Yeah.
So the brain is powerful, but it needs a consciousness to give it commands and control it, right? Just like this ship is powerful, but it needs David to give it commands and control it.
Yes.
Also, when he gets inside the ship, Max tells him, your species uses only 10% of your brain, so we filled it up with star charts to see what would happen. Mm-hmm. And then he says that he crashed and his star charts were erased. And I think that this is kind of like he purposefully equates the brain being filled with star charts, and then talks about how his star charts were all erased. I think that's saying like erasement of star charts is equal to memory being erased, right? Brain being damaged, stuff like that.
When that ship starts taking off, or like when they notice the ship is open, the guards then say, like they pick up the phone and say, seal all doors, activate penetration recording, activate all radiation surveillance consoles 1 through 20, switch control monitors to automatic. None of that meant anything. What's penetration recording? Why are we activating that? Sorry, I just loved the quote-unquote technobabble that they had these guards yell, because I couldn't derive meaning from any of it. None of it was any sort of security lingo. I mean, penetration is, like, you can be a penetration tester, but that has nothing to do with what's going on here. I thought it was very irresponsible of the Phalonians or Trimaxians. I don't know what they are. They're from planet Phalonia, but they're called Trimaxians, I guess. It was very irresponsible of them to kidnap a random kid from another planet and then just be like, hey, how much can we put into his brain until it explodes? What kind of a test is this? This is just a horrible way to derive any information. And why do they need to know that? Well, unless they're like, hey, we can use humans as storage devices.
It's because they actually represent an accident that happened to him. They're just a mean force that's damaging his brain. He got one of the aliens from a place called the Pixar Elliptic.
Yep.
Which I think is weird because Pixar didn't even exist back then.
No, they probably just picked a random cool sounding word, just like Pixar did when they named their company.
Okay, so my next, and I think one of the biggest evidences is at one point they are trying to go back. So they're trying to get back to David's house. David doesn't know how to get back to his house, right? The Max blames it on David not even knowing how to like get to the gas station or something like that. But like he lives in a new house. Of course he wouldn't know how to get to his new house where his family now lives.
No, of course.
Anyway. So anyway, at one point they stop by a convertible full of like kids who are listening to music. And they ask them for directions on how to get where they're going. And I just think it's interesting that the lyrics that play on the radio when they are talking to those kids, the lyrics that we hear is a song and it sings Trapped in My Mind.
Dude. Okay, so just a quick question. How likely is it that that song was purposefully picked? Not only that, but that it starts playing at a specific part of the song to send a message to the audience. How likely is that? Like, it's a background song in a scene. Do you think anyone would actually look that deep into it? Or would they just be like, hey, we got the rights to this song, so play it?
I would say it's extremely likely. Well, I mean, as a filmmaker, that's what I would do. I mean, I've been a writer, but I've also been an editor and an audio editor. You don't pick portions of songs for no reason. Everything you do, you have a reason for. Right?
Because that song would have been added in later. Like, it probably wasn't playing during the scene.
No, it wasn't. They didn't have it, they definitely dubbed it in later.
Yeah.
Right? You choose it for a reason, and it's playing Trapped in My Mind when this kid is literally trapped in a spaceship that looks like a
giant brain. Yes.
So I feel like that is not a coincidence. So as it turns out, this song is actually called Trapped in My Mind, and it was composed by David Kittay and Guy Moon, and it was performed by David Kittay specifically for this movie. A full version of the song does not exist. Only this one little snippet that says Trapped in My Mind. Someone was sending us this message, Trapped in My Mind, as this kid is literally trapped in a brain-shaped spaceship. And the song that they could have gotten if they just paid for one was The Cure's A Man Inside My Mouth, which supposedly Trapped in My Mind is an obvious parody of that song. Wasn't obvious to me, but I don't know that song. But regardless of whatever A Man Inside My Mouth is, they changed the lyrics to Trapped in My Mind, and that is a deliberate choice. And I think that, David Kittay talked to Randall Kleiser. Randall Kleiser told him what the film was really about, and so David Kittay wrote and performed this song.
That's pretty interesting. I think that's good evidence.
And then anyway, so David goes to his home. He's able to find it because his brother shoots off fireworks, which is actually the same box of fireworks that David had in his room
Whoa.
8 years previous. Why they kept around 8-year-old fireworks for that long, I don't know. But his brother shoots off what looks like bottle rockets, but when they explode, they're definitely
explode
aerials.
Big. Yes. And also, like, it's an artillery. Like, it shoots off multiple of them. Like, I mean, never when we see it up close, but whenever we see it from the Navigator's point of view, it's shooting off fireworks like crazy. Also,
right.
Dude, David's brother is so freaking cool. He's so dedicated. Yeah. He's like,
dude, he's a very good brother.
He's like, I'll burn down the whole house if I have to. Like,
well, I mean, I think even if this is all in his head, I think that his brother is a good character, right? Because he's been feeling guilty.
Dude, David loves his brother. He sees his brother as like the ultimate hero.
Well, he sees his brother as feeling guilty for causing his accident, right? And needing to make up for it.
Yeah.
Right? So in David's mind, it's his brother's fault, and his brother's got to make up for what he did.
That's true.
And he does, he really comes through.
Max did the mind transfer with David and then immediately starts talking and acting like a complete idiot. At which point David says, "You sound just like a human,"
which he does not.
No. So,
yeah. Do we have to discuss that part? Because that's where the movie gets really
the movie
bad.
Gets horrible. Because it was a fun movie
it's
right
like
up until
unwatchable
then. It gets
at that point.
Unbearable. David was not in any way a silly or crazy or spastic kid.
No, it's like
he was a serious.
It's like
kid.
Your main criticism you had of Shazam.
Yeah, it was Shazam. Like adult Shazam acts nothing like kid Shazam. Kid Shazam he's like a brooding, like low-key kid with lots of problems because he's like a foster kid and has had a rough life. Whenever he's Shazam, he's a crazy kooky. I'm a kid. Let's make funny jokes and sing about lightning with my hands.
What an adult would think to do if they were pretending to be a kid.
And did you have any reason that Max would act like that? Like, does that represent anything?
Maybe that could be just Max's brain just going crazy.
Okay. So he's breaking down at this point, like Jinx from Space Jam.
When he gets back to his house, his family want him to stay, right? But the thing is, he's still 8 years in the future, and he says, if I stay, the scientists would treat me like a guinea pig for the rest of my life. And I think that what he's saying is like, if I stay in this ravine, in this coma, I'll be like at a hospital for the rest of my life, right?
Okay.
He needs to come back. He needs to wake up. Right. But like, I'm just saying, like, he doesn't even know he's still in the ravine, but like he's in a coma, right? And if he stays in the coma, doctors are going to treat him like a guinea pig for the rest of his life.
Yes.
Well, so they go back in time. Now, I think just visually, when they go back in time, it's interesting that what they fly through is like a black plane above and below and a bunch of little electrical neurons going between them.
Yeah.
I think it kind of looks like, how you might depict the neurons of a brain.
Also, he sees into the robot's head. He sees its brain, which is boiling. It's just a boiling brain, bubbling and fizzing and frothing. Like, I thought that was interesting anyway. Dude, that robot is so irresponsible. Like, he's willing to potentially vaporize David for no reason. Like, David can live in the future. This could kill him. Like, why is the robot even willing to go along with this?
After they go back in time, he wakes up in the same ravine. And he just gets out of it, and he goes and he meets his parents, and they go on the boat. They don't know that he has had an injury, right? He doesn't tell them.
He should tell them. Like, that was no joke.
And then at the very end, he still has an alien on his shoulder, and I think, or in his backpack.
Yeah.
And I think this represents the fact that his brain is still very damaged because he did not get any treatment.
Okay, so did he die, or did he wake up as we saw, just like an hour later or less?
He woke up as we saw. It was all just a brain damage hallucination.
Okay, cool. I mean, I think this is very different from other theories that you say might be all in their head. Like, this is nothing like Return to Oz or Phantasm. I think there's really good evidence. Like, we know that this kid fell down and got hurt.
And he wakes up exactly where he was to begin with, you know?
And then after he gets hurt, everything's weird and doesn't quite make sense. And there are a lot of references to brains and brain damage, right? And then, of course, like you said, he wakes up in the exact same place at the end and goes back and things are just a little off. I think that there is really good evidence that this kid hurt his brain and his brain is trying to tell him that. So that's good. And it's a good theory. And I think it takes a movie which unfortunately became a very bad movie towards the end.
Yeah.
And makes it more interesting, makes it more watchable.
Everything related to NASA in this movie makes zero sense.
No, it makes no sense.
I think possibly because this kid knows nothing about NASA.
Yep. No, it's a good theory. I think it's really interesting.
All right. Well, this has been The Popcorn Isn't Real with me, Leif Eric, and my brother Torvald, and we are signing off. Music for this episode was provided by Christine, and we'll see you next time.